Hello there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Ryan in Singapore. Welcome to our mindfulness practice. What I've been wanting to do after posting this course, basically what I had done is finish up the series on change and how to make positive changes in your life, and now we're kind of transitioning into the 9 attitudes, and it's interesting to see just how some of these link up with the retreat that I've been on. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about retreat, which is what I did last week, and then this week I'm going to kind of get back into talking about some of the 9 attitudes. So today the attitude we'll go through is acceptance. So, what are the 9 attitudes? They are non-judging, patience, beginner's mind, trust, non-striving, acceptance, letting go, gratitude, and generosity. And so today we focus on acceptance. These attitudes aren't independent of one another. They certainly interlink, but it can be helpful to talk about them bit by bit, and to talk a little bit more about how they link up together. So that's the topic today is acceptance. So what is acceptance? I think what happens when we hear acceptance is often mistaking what acceptance is. That acceptance people may tend to think of acceptance as passive resignation. It's like, well, here's what's going on, here's what it is, and that's what my life is. My life is this way, and that's just how things are. And kind of giving up and saying that there's nothing that I can do because my life is this way. And that's not at all what acceptance is. It doesn't mean that we're liking or approving. What it does mean is that we're not arguing with reality any longer. And I think that's kind of where we might get stuck, is that we may be in denial. I think that's really how I see acceptance, is the opposite of denial. So instead of pushing away or denying or resisting that things are a certain way, accepting that this is it. Like, this is happening. And in fact, what does resistance sound like? Resistance can sound like, this shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't feel this way. This person should be acting differently. And I think these may sound very familiar, especially this person should act differently. I think we really may get caught up on wishing for an ideal version of not only ourselves, but of the people around us, that we want people to be a certain way even when they're not. And I think part of acceptance is that understanding that people are the way that they are, and maybe they will change one day, but it's not something that we can force. And I think that's another thing that acceptance is this not forcing things to be the way that they are not. And I think that's something that can be really hard to let go of, that things are this way, and can we accept this is what things are like, this is what that person's like. So when the inner fight quiets, the body softens, the breath eases, and clarity finally becomes possible. So on my retreat, I think that's the one thing that was really interesting, is that the common theme of my discomfort, let's say, wasn't about what was happening on the retreat itself. Most of the time it was fighting what it was that was happening, especially fighting what was happening in my mind. And so seeing, and what was nice too, is I started to find common themes. So when I was trying to escape the retreat into something pleasurable, into something to distract me, I could see that my mind would tend to go to a particular place. When I thought about, I found a lot of my internal a lot of my thinking was about future conversations I would have about, so something was going on with me, and the way that I would digest that was imagining telling someone about it. And I find that was often something that would come up, and it would be frustrating because it came up over and over and over again. And I found that was one of the things that was extremely distracting. And I found that to help that difficulty subside, one of the most powerful things to do was to remind myself, this is what my mind is doing right now. I don't have control over this. That my mind is wandering on its own. That my thoughts are coming up, and these thoughts are what they are, and I don't have the ability to change them. That my thoughts show up in my mind unannounced, without invitation. They just show up, and I never know what they're going to be. So this is part of the acceptance process. This is what I'm thinking about right now. And so I'll go into the different acceptance of the different realms in a moment. But first, I just want to say, the common misconception of acceptance is that we are letting things stay as they are. So what acceptance actually is the first step towards our wise action. It's this very first step. And I mentioned in the 9 Attitudes course about, you can't get to where you want to go, in physical reality. If I want to go to the Empire State Building, I think I'm already there, then there's nowhere for me to go. There's nothing for me to do. But if I realize that I haven't yet made it to my goal, then I can start planning my pathway to how to get there. And that doesn't go with just physical locations, that goes with where we are in our lives. So acceptance is this understanding of where we actually are, so that we can really start to take action as to where we want to go. So it is the first step we take towards wise action, is acceptance. So we can't change what we refuse to see. You cannot respond skillfully to what you're insisting should be different, right? And that's just so funny how that happens, right? As we go, like, this shouldn't be this way, and I refuse to accept that things are this way. And in my refusal, in my fighting, that leaves no room for me to begin to change things because of that refusal. And I mean, I get it too. Sometimes it's easier to be in denial because of how uncomfortable it may be to see others for the way they are, or maybe even harder is to see ourselves the way we are. When we see what it is that we're doing clearly, sometimes that can be really painful, because we don't want to accept that this is what's happening with me right now. And I hesitate to say this is who I am, because our thoughts and our actions don't define who we are, or don't need to define who we are. And I think that's interesting too about thoughts, is that, what is it like? So in retreat, there were periods for me where there was no thinking, that I had meditated enough, that I had focused on the present moment enough, that I stayed locked in the present moment. And so what happens in those moments when there's no thinking? Who am I if I'm not my thoughts? Who am I if I'm not all of this attention to what's going on in my mind? So that's just a fun side note to explore. So besides this analogy of you can't get to somewhere without knowing where you are, another good analogy is acceptance is like turning on the lights before you clean your room. So if you try and clean your room in the dark, it's going to be a lot harder than if you can see things clearly. So Acceptance as internal experiences. So the three domains that we tend to talk about are thoughts, emotions, and body. So thoughts, acceptance in thoughts, number one is we're not choosing what thoughts are appearing. Acceptance is noticing thoughts instead of arguing with them. So it's just noticing. Okay, thinking is here. Judging is here. I'm judging my experience. This is difficult. This is unpleasant. Just observing the fact that these things are happening instead of pushing them away. I know attitude number one's non-judging. So sometimes, and what's interesting about this attitude is we tend to judge ourselves for judging, which is yet another thing that you can notice. So notice clearly what is happening. This is really what's behind acceptance. Emotions also arrive on their own schedule. Acceptance helps us feel them without being overwhelmed. This is sadness. This is frustration. That naming emotions creates space, right? It's instead of, and in fact, even how you say it can affect your experience. I am angry is different from I am experiencing anger in my body and my mind right now. Like experiencing it that way creates a little bit of space, and that space gives us a little bit more room to handle it, right? Between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Bodily sensations can also be met with acceptance. So it helps us to soften our physical habits like bracing, tensing, or pulling away. We can notice those things happening without needing to change them immediately. But what's interesting is that noticing them can open the door for change. Sometimes noticing something is already enough to begin to allow it to change. So if you notice tension in the shoulders, just by noticing it, it might give you, because you've noticed it, it might give you the ability to ease it. So just know that that is possible. And so the question is, and this goes with other bodily sensations like physical discomfort and pain, and especially chronic pain from chronic physical conditions we may be suffering from. And that's another thing too, is that's how we look at it. Chronic physical conditions that we are suffering from, chronic physical conditions that we are experiencing, the language that we use around them, and I don't even mean the language coming out of our mouths, but also the internal monologue that we have that goes along with this can change how we experience it. It's one thing about mindfulness-based stress reduction. This course came as an antidote to people who had chronic pain. And it was, that was one of the suggestions. Can I look at this and maybe use a different word? Is pain maybe is just the word that I default to, that my mind automatically locks into? Instead of pain, can I explore this physical sensation more? Can I use more descriptive words besides just pain? And as we examine, as we explore, as we accept what it is that's going on inside our bodies, then we have more capacity to see it objectively instead of by default seeing it negatively. So acceptance opens the door, and it's kindness and other attitudes as well that allow us to walk through. So hang on, Frank's just sitting here, so I thought I'd let him say hello. I'm accepting that Frank is in the room. and wants something as he always does. So before we get into the meditation, I think something that I think is key. It's important because it certainly the retreat, right? What was the most instrumental thing that I got out of the retreat is bringing mindfulness into daily life. I just felt that this retreat in particular was very good at helping me see mindfulness in daily life. This Thanks, guys. Yeah, that's Frank, my cat. And he does have really nice blue eyes. Thanks, everybody, for saying hi to Frank. Hi, Natasha. Hi, Alexa. Hi, Angie. Hi, everybody else who's joined. Yeah, it's great to have new people here today. I appreciate you guys joining in. So anyway, I'll just finish up here with the talk on acceptance, and then we'll get into the meditation on acceptance. So difficult conversation, example 1, right? Resistance could sound like, I can't believe they said that. Acceptance turns it back inside. I feel hurt. That's what's here. That opens a space for a calmer response. Instead of resisting, I can't believe they said that. I feel hurt. That's what's here. In relationships, or parenting, let's use one that's close to home for me. They should know better. Acceptance sounds like they're having a hard moment, so am I. And that helps to reduce reactivity. Health, aging, and physical limitations. Resistance sounds like my body shouldn't feel like this. And certainly as we age, this, that's kind of that's what can show up, right? Is why does my body feel like this? Why can't it feel the way that it used to feel? So instead of my body shouldn't feel like this, acceptance sounds like my body is asking for care, and it can support wiser choices. So we can choose things that are helping our body as it is right now, instead of worrying about what we think our bodies should have. And let's use procrastination. This one we've been using a lot in change. Resistance sounds like, I shouldn't struggle with this. Why is this such a big deal for me? Acceptance is, right now there is avoidance in the mind. And that can create the space to make that first step towards taking action. My body, and I have to admit, like this is one that's helped me a lot recently. That I've found my own procrastination has been helped so much by my mindfulness around it, by my observation. Procrastination is here because procrastination is one of those things that I love. Procrastination itself is avoidance, right? And my mind avoids the avoiding, because procrastination feels so bad that I don't even want to admit that it's there. And I have to say that this has helped me a lot, is that observation of the desire to procrastinate and seeing it with open arms, just going, procrastination's here right now. And that has kind of helped me go, okay, I see it. I can be friends with it. I can be friends with my procrastination. And that really, that kind of kindness and loving ease really helps me to start going in and tackling the things that I find are unpleasant that I need to work on. So acceptance is our pathway to ease. So ease comes from not changing circumstances, but releasing the fight. Ease comes from not changing circumstances, but from releasing the fight. Acceptance relaxes the nervous system. Our breath lengthens naturally. Thoughts lose their urgency. We become less caught up and more able to choose our response. If you can learn to be at ease with your experience becomes easier. So, just a little. It's a little talk on acceptance. It's a little bit different from what I've put in my course. So do check it out if you haven't already. Like I say, I've loved making the course, and I hope if you've taken it, you've enjoyed the course. It's Leoniki or Leonique. Thanks for your feedback. Angie says I'm still very young. You know, I mean, I have to say that my genetics and my personal practices have been kind to me, and I think I'm a bit older than I look. So, yeah, Frank is a rag doll. All right, you guys ready to get into the meditation? I'm gonna say hi to just a few more people. Hello, Paul in Washington, D.C. Hello, Cage in Alabama. Great having you here today. Anami, all very resonant and shared in a very easily digestible way. Thanks so much for being here. Let's go ahead and get into our practice. And, you know, I'm going to say this meditation is about acceptance. But what's funny is that all meditations are about acceptance. So, I mean, that's the great thing about meditating, is that it's a microcosm of real life. So what you discover in your meditation, you can apply directly into real life. Not that meditation isn't real life, but you know what I mean. So get comfortable wherever you are. Would encourage you to choose a posture that relaxes you, yet lets you be alert. You can allow your eyes to close if you like, and say on the retreat that I just came back from, it's all open eye meditation. So that's something that I've been exploring. What is open eye meditation like? So if you do want to keep your eyes open, it's gazing downwards at about a 45-degree angle. If you're sitting on the floor, that would be a spot maybe a meter in front of you, or 3 feet if you're in the U.S. So just take a moment to notice, what does the body feel like? What body is showing up here today? Already I'm noticing, you know, as I scan my own body, I notice tension in the neck. Tight muscles from sleeping. So waking up, what's my body feel like now? I'm rolling my shoulders, I'm moving my head back and forth just to help encourage a little relaxation. And then now I'm just feeling my breath naturally wanting to deepen. So it's like after a little bit of stretching in the neck and shoulders, my breath naturally begins to deepen. So if you like, taking a few extra deep breaths here to stretch out the belly, to encourage a little bit of relaxation in the body. So you can allow your shoulders to rest down. You know, notice that if your shoulders want to squeeze upwards at all. If you're sitting on a chair, I'd encourage you to try to bring your back away from the backrest. Feet flat on the floor. Sitting up straight and tall with dignity, with purpose. Like this meditation is for training the mind. So seeing if you can get the most out of your meditation by really bringing your full your full determination. So as best you can, staying focused on the present moment, and that can be done by paying attention to what it feels like to be breathing. So most often, as I teach, I'm encouraging participants to bring attention to the belly, feeling the belly rising and falling. But as my attention became a bit more focused in the retreat, I shifted my attention to the nostrils. So I found that feeling my breath at the nostrils was very helpful, just because it's not a movement of the body that I'm monitoring. Instead, it's the actual sense of touch as air moves in and out of the nostrils. So just feeling that sensation of the air. And feeling my nose as well, the tip of my nose, a bit cold. So feeling that cooler air coming into the nostrils as you breathe in. Feeling the warmer air come out as you breathe out. Maybe noticing sensations of air moving across the upper lip. So as best you can, focusing your attention on this sensation of breathing. And as you're focused on the breath, you might be able to hear your thoughts as they're forming and as they're coming up. And sometimes you're outright completely distracted, that you're so focused on your thoughts that you've completely lost awareness of the breath. So this is the very first step of coming back to focus, is accepting that the mind has wandered. That there are thoughts coming up, whatever they be. They can be something serious, something completely ridiculous. It doesn't matter. Just acknowledging thoughts are here. This is here. Let this be here. This is what is happening in my experience right now. And so with that knowledge, with that acceptance and acknowledgement, as best we can, releasing the thoughts, coming back to focusing our attention fully on the physical sensation of breath. Air moving into the nostrils as we breathe in. Air coming out of the nostrils as we breathe out. Movement of air on the inhalation. Movement of air on the exhalation. And there I've seen my own mind wandering, completely lost focus of the breath. And so here we go. That's where I was. Now I'm back to here and now, focusing on the feeling of breathing. And sometimes my thoughts go to meditation practice. And this is also thinking. So releasing, coming back to observing the breath. It's this breath, this one happening right now. Curiously examining what it feels like to be breathing in. What it feels like to be breathing out. And so sometimes acceptance can look like labeling in our meditation practice. It can be thinking, right? We can remind ourselves what it is that we see. I'm thinking. I'm planning. I'm reflecting. I'm reminiscing. I'm worrying. So that acknowledgement helps to release our grip on whatever it is that is absorbing the mind and the emotions, so that we can let go. Come back to the present, the feeling of breathing. We're going to be wrapping up the meditation here soon. So what I'd like to do is ask you to bring some gratitude to yourself for having made this time to practice today, to be accepting of what it is that's going on in our bodies, our minds, and our emotions. That is already very powerful. And the first step to starting to make things different. So let's close practice with 3 rings of the bell. All right. Thanks, everyone, for being here today. How did it go? What was the meditation like for you? Angie says, in a couple decades, you will definitely be thinking more, why does my body feel like this? Yeah, I'm going back to see my mom who's turning 70, and I'm sure when I get to be 70, that's it. This is the fact, right? If you don't make it to 70, then you're not going to have those experiences, and so that I'm looking forward to it. I know that I plan to live a long time. That's how I've been trying to live my life. It was after I turned 40, which was a while ago now, but that was the commitment I made to myself at 40 was let's see what we can do to make aging easeful. Right, so that as I get older, it's going to be that I'm going to be more with it in my mind, and my body is going to be more easeful. And so this is kind of my physical, what I eat, how I exercise, how I sleep, how I hydrate, how I meditate. A lot of this has to do with making my life more comfortable as I age so that I'm able to do more. I think that in the next few decades, there's so much positive benefit that I can have, locally in within my family, maybe even as a meditation teacher. So, that's it. And I think that those changes, Angie, that you mention are going to make me a better teacher too, because I will have experienced all of that. And, I can talk about the experiences of my body changing, and I can even reflect back on, what it was like to be a teenager, so like having all of these different experiences hopefully will make me a better teacher in general. So thanks, Chris. I do my best to not just be a good example for you all, to my kids, and to show you that I make mistakes and I slip up, I have problems, I procrastinate. Things aren't always perfect because that's life. Life isn't perfect, and I think any teacher, anyone who's any public figure who tries to show that everything's perfect. I just don't understand why. It's less connecting. I mean, the way to really connect with everybody else is just to remind us that we're all here together. We're all perfectly imperfect, and that's okay, because that's what life's about. Thanks, Alexa. I really appreciate all the positive words here. Sybil says every day is a bonus. Celebrate it if you can. Love that. I love that. Every breath is a gift. You never know when your last breath is coming. the sound of running water. I hope that's not coming from. If it's from my end, there's my computer fan always has to run as I'm doing this because I've got, this actually is a lot of load for my computer to be doing this live event. Hi, Florence. Mel says, my body feels awful and need to accept how it feels today. Thanks, Mel, for sharing. And I hope that you'll, and this is the other lesson is impermanence, right? Is that things are shifting. We have times of difficulty, we have times of ease, and I hope that your time of ease comes sooner. Anami says, mind was quite busy today, but given all you'd shared prior and during, helped remain at ease with the current experience, being as it was, and return more gracefully to the practice. Thanks so much. And I wish you all the best. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm going to flash the course up here one more time because that's what, today's session is kind of linked to lesson number 7 of my Attitudes of Mindfulness course. So the 9 Attitudes of Mindfulness, lesson 7 is all about acceptance. So check it out if you have a chance. Yeah, absolutely. My life is imperfect, definitely, and that's why I meditate. That's why I do the things that I do. You should ask my family. Ask my family here. Ask my partner. What was Ryan like? Is Ryan different before meditation? Before he started meditating? Ask my parents. What do you see Ryan's different? For sure. Like, I'm imperfect. I'm a work in progress, and it's okay if you are too. Let's close. Okay, I'll be back here in 47 hours and 15 minutes to do the next attitude. So come back. Hope to see you again then. Let's close practice with some well wishes to ourselves and to everybody else who's here. So follow along if you like. May I be happy and peaceful. May everyone watching, listening, wherever you are, I wish you all happiness and peace. May all sentient life, all human beings, everyone around the world, everyone everywhere, no matter what their condition right now, I wish them all happiness and peace. Thanks again, everybody. Take care. See you soon. Until then, bye-bye.